Welcome, everyone. I have the pleasure to present Bob Pomeroy to give a talk today on addressing the overcapacity in small-scale marine fisheries of Vietnam. So I just wanted to say something about Bob. He's, you have a background in, I'm reading off here, I'm sorry, natural resource and environmental economics, with specifically policy analysis, fisheries management and development, agriculture economics, coastal resource management, international development, agriculture marketing and agriculture extension. So a really wide background, but Bob's really an economist from the start. But you worked a lot with rehabilitating coastal livelihoods and a lot with co-management of fisheries. Done some of the groundbreaking work, publishing also with Pickwick Berkeley, for example, kind of a seminal book, and others. So I'm not going to go into any more details, and you can say something more if I missed anything.
That works.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. And thank you to Beatrice and Carl and the Center for inviting me over. It's a multi-purpose trip to have this presentation, and we're also trying to develop a research proposal looking at the role of middlemen in fisheries. So it's a busy week. I had an email from you on March 19th, and it said if you could think about how the issues of overcapacity in small-scale fisheries can be linked to poverty traps, socio-ecological traps, or tipping points that would push a system over some irreversible limit, please include it. Well, this is it. I mean, this is the limit, what I'm going to be talking about. A friend of mine, Nigel Armada in the Philippines, we were talking about this issue one time, and he calls it translated from the Filipino, sort of the silent issue in fisheries. We all know that overcapacity exists, and nobody wants to deal with it because politically, economically, socially, it's just too difficult an issue because it means having to disrupt people's lives. And so, come on in. And so how we deal with this issue is really sort of central to dealing with the problems of fisheries. What I wanted to do was talk about three issues, was sort of give an overview of the problem of overcapacity. And I'm focusing most on small-scale fisheries. That's what I work. These are small day boats that exist around the world. And then talk a little bit about the issue in Southeast Asia. And then focus on Vietnam. I've been working quite a bit with support from Danita in Vietnam. I've worked there for 18 years, but the last 3 years as sort of a policy advisor and consultant on a large project in Vietnam. And so part of what we're trying to do, as I'll talk about, is address this issue. We actually had developed a World Bank project trying to address the issue, and it wasn't prioritized by the government, unfortunately. So it's something we're still trying to move forward. I hope you can see that. Oh yeah, it comes out better there than it does here. So what is the problem of overcapacity? Cunningham and Grabovall, writing for FAO, said that in fisheries that are unmanaged or managed as de facto open access, the race for fish soon tends to create a fishing capacity that is larger than that needed to catch the sustainable yield. If this is uncontrolled, this capacity generally leads to overfishing. Well, I mean, that's really the issue, is the link between overcapacity and overfishing. When we talk about overcapacity, it differs from excess capacity. Excess capacity is a short-term concept, in the sense that you have too many boats in a short term. Overcapacity is a longer-term concept. It's when there are excessive levels of capacity over the longer term in relation to some target yield that you're trying to achieve, or in terms of the capital within the fishery, such as boats, skiers, fishers that are used in the fishery. So it says the idea is that over time, you're either surpassing some target yield that you're trying to achieve from the fishery, or the capital that's been invested in the fishery. And in simple terms, overcapacity refers to the fact that there's too many fishers chasing too few fish over the long term. So it really is a long-term concept. The capacity builds up over the long term and leads to problems, a number of problems within the fishery. A number of people have talked about this. One of the bigger studies came out in 1997. Serge Garcia of FAO estimated that in 1989, and this is 20 years ago now, but it was really the only study that's still been done, the world's fishing fleet reflected an overcapacity of 25% to 53% with respect to maximum economic yield. This was 20 years ago. It's even more so now. The World Wildlife Fund, Garrett Porter, did a study around the same time saying that the world's fleet was 2.5 times greater than the world's fish stocks could sustain at that time. Over the period 1970 to 1990, the capacity of the world's large fisheries grew 8 times faster than the rate of growth of landings from world capture fisheries. And in the U.S., a recent study by the National Marine Fisheries Service found that overcapacity existed in 55% of the 73 important fisheries in the United States. So it's a global problem, the issue of overcapacity, not only in small-scale fisheries, but in industrial fisheries. So what are the issues? Well, overcapacity tends to develop as a result of some market imperfection. And for the most part, it's an absence of clear property rights. It's just, continued entry into the fishery as a result of unclear property rights. And what it leads to is a number of problems. First of all, overinvestment in fishing boats and gear, and too many fishermen, captains and crew, leading then to reduced profit and decline in the quality of life of the fishers, their families, and the communities, increasing conflict for what's left out there as overfishing occurs, and political strife. And this is really the big issue because, as I said, nobody wants to deal with this issue. It's politically too touchy. How do we have, if we're going to put in access control, if we're going to start to deal with this problem, the social implications, the economic implications are extremely difficult, especially as I'll talk about in small-scale fisheries. And so the political issues in fisheries departments are extremely difficult to address. As I said, overcapacity is one of the leading causes of overfishing. As I'll talk about more from Southeast Asia, what I'm focusing on is really nearshore fisheries, the small-scale fisheries that make up the majority of the world's fisheries. Many of these fisheries are overfished, and they're resulting in severe depletion of fish stocks and degradation of marine habitats. You're all familiar with that. But these declines have increased poverty among coastal fishers in developing countries. As catches have declined, so has the rate of poverty, as I'll illustrate in Vietnam. In addition, overfishing has reduced the contribution of coastal fisheries to employment. I was just working in Vietnam 2 weeks ago. We were in a province called Nha Trang, which is in the northern part of Vietnam. And as we were driving to one of our pilot sites, I noticed all these young men on the sides of the road with small pieces of luggage. And I couldn't understand what it was. When we finally got into the fisheries department, and we were saying, what's going on? We were talking to some fishermen, and they were saying, well, basically, young men now who used to fish are moving down South Vietnam to work, so they're migrating south during certain periods of the year because it's not profitable even to be a crewman on a fishing boat anymore in these places. And so, the impact on employment, on export revenues, in many places on food security, and this is a real big issue, and on the social stability of rural areas as they change as a result of this. And as an economist, I have to talk about economics. Overfishing has dissipated wealth, or basically the economic rent that comes from the fisheries as a result of all this.